Robyn and I have your Detroit Red Wings preview, plus the trade deadline right around the corner and a wild card watch update, all on today's Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast.
You are Locked On Utah Hockey Club, your daily podcast on the Utah Hockey Club, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us once again for the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast. I'm veteran NHL voice Tom Callahan, alongside longtime team analyst Robyn Leaño, and we're here to talk some puck with you every single day. Thanks for making us your first listen when it comes to the Utah Hockey Club. Want to let you know today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Okay, on today's show, we've got a Detroit Red Wings preview coming your way, a wild card watch update, and Robyn, a few things are happening. The transactions, I'm sure, are going to come fast and furious here over the next couple of days, but right now, we have some big injury news over in the Eastern Conference, which could have a ripple effect. But I also wanted to talk about some of the moves going on. So it's the most important thing is to start with the Detroit Red Wings, because this game, Thursday night, is the first of a back-to-back on the road and a chance for Utah to try to keep the momentum going.
It really is, and it's interesting because this is now happening after the Utah Hockey Club has taken, several days off. I feel like it feels like been a minute since we've seen them play, right? But here we are, they're coming back at it, getting the start here versus Detroit, and we're now in the thick of things. This is part of a back-to-back, by the way, of course, as you mentioned, and to top it all off is sandwiched in between the back-to-back is the NHL trade deadline, which we will still get to later.
You know, Robyn, you're right. It feels like it's been a hot minute since we've talked hockey, actual games. We've been talking hockey all week, but it is weird to have this big of a gap. You come out of Four Nations and you get your appetite whet by this little homestand and some pretty good hockey, if I do say so myself, from the Utah Hockey Club. And now all of a sudden it's been like just 4 days of the big news. At least there was big news, was the Olli Monta contract extension. But I'm excited. I'm ready to get back on the ice. Let's see some game action here. I'm pumped for this.
We want to see game action mainly because we have a team that is still really in the thick of a wild card race.
Absolutely. We're going to go inside the wild card race here in just a moment, but let's focus on the opponent for a little bit, the Detroit Red Wings, in their own wild. It's going to be interesting to see for the Detroit Red Wings. How is this going to pan out? They're on the outside looking in, but they're still tied right now. And believe me, just like the West, the East wild card race is going to be a jumble. So the Rangers and Red Wings both have 66 points, but Detroit is on the outside looking in because they have fewer regulation wins and fewer regulation overtime wins as well. So both of those tiebreaks, they would lose head-to-head to the Rangers, but Detroit is tied with them on points. Then you've got Ottawa and Montreal, 1 point behind, both of them tied in points. Boston at 64, even though they're talking about selling. Islanders 63, Flyers 62. They're not even really out of it. That's all the way down to your, 2, 4, 6 places removed from the wild card race. Now, look, it's not to say some of those teams don't need help, but Robyn, the other thing that underscores all of this as a talking point is how important every single game is. You are going to get the hungriest, sharpest, most important version of the Detroit Red Wings. They are going to absolutely come after Utah Hockey Club.
Oh, and they absolutely will, and it's we're going to see how that all plays out. One thing I absolutely love, though, is the fact that the Utah Hockey Club plays the Detroit Red Wings immediately after signing the defenseman they acquired from the Red Wings to an extension.
Yeah, I do like that. And again, only a third-round draft pick given up for Monta. I think it was a steal. I love the way that deal is going to pan out for the Utah Hockey Club. So I think absolutely fantastic. And you know what, Robyn, going in to Detroit, not an easy place to play. Can be a hostile environment, let's face it. It's a difficult building, and
It's not the
the
Joe anymore, but it still is
well,
a
it's
hard
not. Thank God. I mean, the Joe is the Joe, but I can't lie. That was the worst NHL building I called a game in. Like it was
Oh, yeah.
time. It was time. I realized there was a lot of history and a lot of memories in that building, but it was time.
Even who was it? Was it Rogers Place or Rogers Palace in Edmonton? The old.
Well, the Northlands Coliseum is what I knew it as a kid growing up. Even that, and like that, the Saddle Dome in Calgary, those are older buildings, but
Nassau.
they were still nice. Well, Nassau, that wasn't very good either. I'm glad they got a new place. But yeah, some of those older buildings were nice. Might not have had all the fan amenities, all the suites, all the cool things that we've come to expect in the modern era of building stadiums.
Yeah.
But the Joe was broken seats, and cushions that needed to be replaced, and the tightest press box of all time. I stand up when I do games, when I call a game. There's too much energy and excitement in hockey to sit down. There was no place for me to put my bar stool that I was sitting on. People had to squeeze between me and the wall, me standing up, and the bar stool, and then my engineer who's wedged in next to me. And once I actually ended up with a color commentator, it was packed in there. I couldn't even put my bag anywhere. It was ridiculous. So I'm very glad they moved on from that. That's just my small rant. I saw some classic games in there. I called some amazing playoff action, regular season action, and that was the good Red Wings. That was the Lidstrom, the Datsuk, Zetterberg, like that era. It was awesome.
Era was pretty fun.
It was awesome. It really was. But yeah, I won't miss the building.
No, absolutely not. But now they're in what I like to call the pizza box.
Nice.
The pizza box. If you know, you know. But no, you're right. It still is it's a hard place to play. I mean, I think in general, because you have you have an original 6 fan base, right? These are loyal,
Yes.
Loyal hockey fans. These are devout hockey fans.
They are, and they are all about the Red Wings. Some fan bases, I think, can turn on their teams quickly. Some fan bases are a little detached in some of especially the bigger cities. But Robyn, every year, doesn't matter if they're in the final or not, there are like 3 U.S. cities that always do really, really well in the Stanley Cup final ratings. And everybody knows it's Detroit and Buffalo. And usually it's either Pittsburgh or Boston as far as the other city. But it's always Buffalo and Detroit 1-2 as far as the cities that watch the Stanley Cup playoffs in the final, regardless of who's in it, because they're hockey people. And so that's Detroit fandom in a nutshell. So, and the Red Wings, looking at this team on that borderline, have 3 20-goal scorers right now. As a matter of fact, Alex DeBrincat's at 29 heading into the game, but Dylan Larkin at 24, Lucas Raymond at 22. It drops off after that. After that, you got 3 guys over 20, and then after that, only 3 even in double digits. Patrick Kane has 15 in 51 games, so he hasn't been healthy all season in totality. Then Andrew Kopp and Marco Kasper have 10 apiece. No one else is in double digits. So for the Red Wings, you know who the weapons are. You know who's going to shoot the puck, the guys you have to keep an eye on, who you have to really defend and defend tight. And I don't know, does that make the game a little simpler for the Utah Hockey Club to know that, hey, those are the guys you got to keep an eye on?
I think in some ways, yes. I think those are the ones that, I mean, it's easy to make a decision and take a look at players and be like, all right, these are the ones we need to shut down. But it's also easy to get complacent and forget all of a sudden, hey, who's this other kid who's all of a sudden not scoring their first hat trick or something, So sometimes that happens. Not saying it's going to happen, but if Utah isn't cautious, it could. And I think that's the big thing. And they have to be a little bit more cautious in a game like this, Tom, because Detroit is right now, they're on a losing streak, right? Like they've been on a pretty hefty losing streak for a while, and they don't want to keep that going, So it's they're going to want to win, and they're going to want to put their best their best hockey forward, especially if they're at home.
Yeah, they've lost 3, 5-4-1 in the last 10. And you know what? At home, not marginally better than on the road. I mean, they're 16-4-3 at home. They're 14-11-3 on the road. So they're a barely above 500 team. So really, Robyn, I think games could go either way against the Red Wings. But to me, I think Utah has a little bit of the edge here. Their scoring's a little more distributed.
Yep.
They're just a slightly deeper team, but the Red Wings have to work hard to beat you. And ideally, that's how Utah is supposed to beat its opponents, through hard work, determination, winning those battles on the wall, and, having some sandpaper in the game.
It really is, but but there still is the aspect of got to make sure this team is going to keep away from the penalty box, because we you and I have talked about it. The penalty kill still not good.
It's gotten a little better, but yes, there's still, plenty of room for improvement.
There's a lot of strides they need to do to be better, but still not great.
Yeah, absolutely. So that game is coming up for the Utah Hockey Club Thursday, 5:00 Mountain Time, 7:00 Eastern Time, puck drop. And then Friday, 6:30 Mountain Time, 8:30 Eastern, a little late start against Chicago. Well, I guess that's Central Time, actually, 7:30 in the Central Time Zone. So that makes sense. So those are the two games coming up here. And again, as Robyn mentioned, NHL trade deadline just ahead. We've got a wild card watch update coming for you here in just a minute. So stick with us. And today's show is brought to you in part by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. So I love the live betting feature because the game's never really over. It keeps every moment exciting, whether you're, maybe, again, we talk to you as Jazz fans as well all the time. Maybe you got a feeling fourth quarter rally coming up here. Maybe something's going to happen. Maybe somebody's going for the triple double. Even if you think someone's going to hit a big time three, you never miss your chance. Plus, the app is easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, so as we come back here, the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast, Tom Callahan along with Robyn Leaño, and it's time for us to take a look at the wild card watch. And Robyn, we said we're going to do this kind of every other show-ish as standings warrant, and I'm going to pop the graphic up now. Now, this is as of 5 p.m. Eastern time on March 5th, so just want to let everybody know that. But Calgary picked up a big 6-3 win against Philadelphia on Tuesday. And that win now actually removes them from the tie with Vancouver and puts them 2 points free and clear. Now, Vancouver has a game in hand, still at 65 points. Vancouver will be in action against Anaheim, who, by the way, the suddenly streaking Ducks. So by the time you may be hearing this on a Thursday, Anaheim and St. Louis will both have played. So these numbers might change a little bit. If St. Louis wins, they vault Vancouver. If Vancouver wins, they will stay 1 point at least in front of St. Louis. And, of course, Utah not playing until Thursday night against Detroit. But not much has changed, Robyn. Everybody is packed right up in there. The only thing going against, I think, Utah right now as we look at these numbers is the fact that their regulation wins are the lowest of any of the four teams in this list. So they're going to have to win their way in free and clear.
Yeah, they will have to do that. And I think that's kind of where we're going to have to, where they're going to have to really beef up a little bit is get as much regulation wins as you can, but also like show again why you're the better, why Utah is supposed to be the better team on paper. And have that and have the scoring come after them, have this new rejuvenated defense really show why Bill Armstrong pieced this defense together. going into overtime, sure, and if you can win in the 3-on-3, that's fine too. But you still want to be able to get the right in regulation and just avoid letting the other team, especially if it's one of these other 4 on here, get any of that quote extra point, because every single point matters at this point.
It absolutely matters, and it matters when you get those points. So if you look at the regulation win and then the row column, regulation and overtime wins, Utah's been excellent in overtime. Their row column is tied with everybody else at 26. Calgary, Vancouver, St. Louis, and Utah all 26 row, but 23 of Calgary's 26 between those two columns, 23 are regulation, and they've won 3 games in overtime. Meanwhile, that means Utah 19 wins are in regulation, 7 overtime wins. So clutch, because you're not going to a shootout, right, Robyn? So if they do finish in a tie with somebody and they end up tied in the regulation win column, that row could then be the tiebreaker that makes the difference. So that's why that's important for them. And I think right now, the way Utah is continuing to play, now they just need to focus on getting points in regulation, because it is really those wins that are going to count, because I guarantee you we're going to end up with a tie somewhere along the way here.
Yeah, I will say the good thing is now at least for the most part, the games in hand aspect is slowly kind of vanishing away. We're not going to see that anymore. Like Vancouver is now playing their 61st game at the time we're recording this. By the time you're done hearing it, that 61st game will already be gone. So most of that quote game in hand will be gone by tonight, right? By tonight when everyone is listening to this. And that will kind of really get an aspect in where we are in points. Utah is just right up there. They're really close. And I mean, right now, I think they're only like a point behind St. Louis, but St. Louis has an extra game played. So we'll see how all that turns out by the time we talk post game.
Robyn, will one game make a difference on Friday? So if they lose to Detroit, if they beat Detroit, will that affect Bill Armstrong's plans for the deadline?
At this point, I really don't think it'll affect all that much. They could maybe it's just some, I wouldn't even say even minor tweaks at this point. Bill Armstrong now has a plan. He kind of already knows what this team is going to be. And it's still looking on tweaking this team for not necessarily this year, but next year, in the year and the years beyond. As we've talked about on this show, Tom, Bill Armstrong is focusing on fitting the timeline. Now, and we've talked about this, right? If this game, or let's say that this Detroit game goes maybe a little better than they thought, maybe he might take a slight extra swing for someone that still fits the timeline, but could also significantly help for this year. Is he going to be upset if they don't help a credibly amount this year? No, because he's still focusing on the future.
I think Bill Armstrong and Gregory Hines have more in common than they realize, because he has been tap dancing around this buyer or seller thing at the trade deadline. And he really I don't know whether we're a buyer, but we're not really a seller. We're kind of somewhere in between. We're in the middle. And that's why I've been going with the phrase opportunistic buyer and seller for this Utah Hockey Club. But it really is interesting, Robyn, because as I just pointed out with that, wild card watch graphic, the row is there, the regulation wins or not. So if it ends up tied, Utah Hockey Club, if everything just kind of goes the way it has, will miss even if they tie for a playoff spot. So here's your, what do you do? You need to then clearly win that playoff spot. So if you want to get in this year, you kind of have to put some of your chips in the middle and make an effort to do that. Or you have to say, you know what? I like what we have. Maybe you move 1 or 2 expiring contracts or a deal that makes sense for some assets And then you go into next year looking to build and grow and maybe do something in free agency. Plus, you got another year where, a couple of your draft picks might be maturing and coming along. So I think if you're Utah Hockey Club, it is a bit of a precarious position, and you want to make sure you get the mix right, because if you don't, you don't want to affect future seasons where ideally you're better and more competitive.
Yeah. I also do want to go ahead, do want to point out that I feel like somewhere we kind of did get a little bit lost along the way of like what the true definition of being a buyer is, right? Because everyone assumes it's those that are like buying for now and getting those rentals and everything like that. But there are two different kinds of buyers, right? There's that one, but there's also the one you mentioned, the opportunistic buyer, the one that's still like figuring out their pieces. They're not gonna go and put all their chips on the table, but they're gonna make some significant acquisitions and additions for the team.
They still have the ability to eat a little bit of a contract here and there if they need to in order to reap benefits either now or in the long term. Or maybe they can take what might appear to be a bad contract if they're willing to take a bit of a risk on a player who is young, still has upside. You can always take a gamble that way if you want to. There's a lot of ways you can spin it.
And here's the thing. Utah, or just I say in general, Bill Armstrong has been amazing at exactly what you just said. And if I still have any, remnant Arizona Coyotes fans listening to this and are still and have jumped and still are Utah fans because it's the same players and the same relatively similar history because of that. All I'll just mention is one name and you'll know exactly what I mean. Shane Gostisbehere. Shane Gostisbehere, if everyone remembers, went over to the Arizona Coyotes. Essentially, actually, Philadelphia paid the Arizona Coyotes to take him. Here, take some extra draft picks. Take Shane Gostisbehere. We don't want him anymore. We can't have him. He doesn't fit our timeline anymore. And what does he do in his that year with Arizona? He tears it up. Best season, one of the best seasons he has ever had. And all of a sudden, it made Philadelphia almost look like jokers, because all of a sudden, not only did Arizona at the time have an incredible acquisition, but they also got a second-round draft pick out of it.
Yep. Yeah, and that's opportunity knocking right there. That's what that is. So, all right, trade deadline Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Robyn and I are going to go over a couple of news items that have come out, including another couple of trades that went down in the NHL on Wednesday. We're going to take a look back at those and discuss the potential impact for the Utah Hockey Club and what lies ahead. So stay tuned. All right, Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Tell your friends about it if you like the show. Tell no one if you think it's terrible. But if you're still listening, you probably don't think it's terrible. So I'm going to go ahead and roll the dice on that myself. Speaking of rolling the dice, Robyn, we had a couple of moves on Wednesday. And this move, Vitek Vanacek going from the Sharks to the Panthers for forward Patrick Giles. Vanacek, NHL experienced goaltender, kind of fills in that what was Spencer Knight. So that makes up for that. I think Florida was just settling things and providing goaltending depth. Not huge. However, how about Tampa Bay? Number one, the Lightning have been, I think, a little forgotten this year. And the fact that this is still a Stanley Cup championship core minus Steven Stamkos, they kind of go back to the well. They reacquire Yanni Gourde from Seattle along with Oliver Bjorkstrand and a 2026 fifth rounder for Michael Eyssimont, and then a 25 second round, a 26 first round, and a 27 first round pick. Robyn, I'm going to say two things. Number one, it's interesting that they brought back Gourde, but he gives them great depth down the middle here, and I think that's going to be a key acquisition. But number two, Tampa Bay does not give a single flip about first round draft picks, do they? They hand them out like candy on Halloween.
I think it's because what it feels like Tampa Bay doesn't really seem to really care all that much about their future. It seems like they're just like they feel like they're still in their own window, and they're like, yeah, let's win as many cuts as we can. Let's see what we can do. I think we can still do it. For the teams that do that, Tom, down the road, it does end up biting them in the ass significantly. Because then they
at some point it will.
Yes, at some point it will. No matter who you are, it's gonna happen. I mean, take a look at a lot of the the dynasties or just the strong teams of the late 2000s and also at the 2010s and where they're at now. I'm looking at you, Chicago Blackhawks, especially.
Well, they mortgaged it though, and they won 3 times.
Oh yeah, they did. And I mean, and take a look. I mean, Tampa had their back-to-back, and they went really strong, and they still kept wanting to go, and everyone was asking. Remember the whole Nikita Kucherov and him saying like, I don't care, like I don't care. We just want to win.
And that's really what it comes down to. And listen to this, Robyn. So heading into Wednesday night, which is when we're recording the show for Thursday, listen to the top 3 teams in the Atlantic. Toronto, 79 points, 8-1-1 in the last 10.
Mm-hmm.
Florida, 79 points, 8-2-0 in the last 10. Tampa Bay, 76 points, 9-1-0 in the last 10. All 3 of those teams are absolutely on fire. Tampa Bay is 9-1, and they're still not gaining much ground on Florida and Toronto because they're 8-2. It's wild to look at that right now. Whereas meanwhile, over in the Metro, Washington's 5-3-2, Carolina's 4-6, New Jersey's 4-6. So there's ground to be gained in the Metro, but boy, Tampa is in a tough spot there. But they're kind of going for it, and they make that trade with Seattle, who clearly Seattle's not in it. My question is, do you think now, to reflect this back to the Utah Hockey Club, do you see other teams now feeling threatened even more by Tampa Bay, and where maybe Toronto or Florida might have said before we're done, now they feel the need to go out and make that extra tweak because Tampa Bay has made a tweak?
We will definitely see, and I'll call it a lot of GMs making, quote, overreactions because of this. Some will make an addition that they don't really need. They feel like they do, and all of a sudden it will cause more harm than good. For some GMs, it still is a panic buy, but it does work out for them. But we're going to see that. We're going to see some panic buys. Now that Tampa wants to go in for, and keep their quote dynasty going, because it still counts. They're still within the time frame to consider a dynasty.
Yeah, they absolutely are. They are, and another cup win this year would. I mean, even without Stamkos, and boy, he is miserable in Nashville this year. That whole team is miserable. It's so bad. But look how it looks good for Tampa Bay right now.
Because they were able to get a little bit more space, and they're able to get the acquisitions they need to be better. For now.
Exactly, and they're still in a window. And just by the way, since we're mentioning it in passing, before we get to the news on Jack Hughes, how disappointing is Nashville this year? They've been open for business the whole time, and they're struggling to even trade anybody outside of Askarov going to the San Jose Sharks, which I think is going to be in 5 years. Sharks fans are going to be like, we stole this guy from Nashville, and you did. Man, Nashville is bad. So as of Wednesday, again, 51 points. That is worse than the Penguins, worse than the Sabres. The Sabres are kind of the laughing stock right now in the NHL, and Nashville is worse. So are the Blackhawks and the Sharks. But 51 points, that is terrible, Robyn. And they really went whole hog this summer.
It's absolutely astonishing, because you and I were talking about how Nashville is going into, quotes, win now mode, right? That's what that's their intent. Their intent was to go to win now mode. But the problem with Nashville was they bought too many players that just don't fit into that scheme. They didn't honestly, Tom, I don't know if it was a scouting issue or whatever went down, but someone misread these players, and they didn't realize just do not fit with Nashville.
159 goals for is the least, not only in the West, but it might be in the entire league. Let me see here. Yeah, nobody else is even close to that. 159 goals for is terrible. Anaheim actually with 160, but that's awful. And here's the weird thing. And Robyn, I know this because I work for Nashville. Bridgestone Arena is a huge home ice advantage for them. They're 15, 12, and 3 on home ice. They're 3 games over 500. On the road, they are 7, 20, and 4.
I will say, I do remember, anytime the Nashville Predators at least were in the playoffs and seeing the whole Smashville vibes, I was like, oh my God, it looks crazy. Plus the perfectly executed "he shoots, he scores, you suck" chant. It doesn't. A lot of teams try it. It is not very well executed in so many places.
Yeah, Nashville has a personality. That arena has a pulse. I can tell you that much. So, one more note to pass along here. Jack Hughes, New Jersey Devils. Unfortunate news is that Hughes had shoulder surgery and is out for the rest of the year. Is supposed to be available for training camp 2025. So they elect to shut him down, Robyn, instead of risking trying to make it worse, because with a shoulder, you definitely can make it worse. So that's the end of the season for him. I don't know that ends the Devils' chances, but it certainly puts some dark clouds over it.
It definitely does put a little bit into question, trying to wonder, all right, what are they going to do? How are they going to respond? New Jersey has always been, I feel like, that team where you kind of don't know how they're going to react to something like this. They're supposed to be because always on paper, like the last several years, they were supposed to be a good team. Some things kind of just never panned out. I'm curious to see what their response is this time, especially losing a player like Jack Hughes. That's huge.
Yes, absolutely. All right, next time Robyn and I are talking here, we're going to wrap up the Detroit game. We're going to take a look at the trade deadline, and it's going to be a big episode. Friday morning, we're going to set the table as best as we can for you here. It's one of the most fun days in the year in the National Hockey League, that's for sure. Oh, by the way, we're also going to preview a Chicago game. So a busy show on Friday. Make sure you're subscribed. You click the bell so you get the notification when everything drops for us. Plus, if there's a trade for Utah Hockey Club, we will do breaking analysis, and we will have that for you right here on the program as well. Robyn, tell folks where they can reach us on social media.
Yeah, you can find us everywhere on social media. We are on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at LO_NHL Utah. You can find us also on Blue Sky at Locked On Utah Hockey. You can find me at Robyn_Leaño on X/Twitter. And at Robyn Icetime on Blue Sky.
I am at Tom Talks on Blue Sky, at Callahan on air on Twitter, and around the deadline, I am still creeping around Twitter a little bit more than normal, so you can reach out to me there as well. All right, well, one more sleep until the NHL trade deadline, and we expect, well, it could get busy here, especially on Friday as we approach that 3 p.m. deadline. So for Robyn, I'm Tom. Thanks for being a part of the Locked On Utah Hockey Club podcast.